Yeah, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us for this JOGL Africa panel discussion. Today we will be talking about the fourth industrial revolution and its implications for social innovation in Africa. So as you may know, JOGL is all about enabling individuals and organizations to be able to carry out their open science and technology projects. So within the context of JOGL Africa, our goal really is to support grassroots innovators and researchers or activists like yourself to develop your projects through our platform and community building efforts. So within this context, we consider that the fourth industrial revolution is also an important concept that it's open for discussion. It has far-reaching consequences, not only for the future of work, but various aspects of our lives in the 21st century society. So our goal for this panel is to engage with you, the JOGL Africa community, and our invited panelists, as well as other stakeholders, to be able to really explore what fourth industrial revolution and what social innovation is all about. We have three speakers here. We have Emmanuel Agbeko Gamor, who is the founder of Urithi Labs and Eliu Gift Hub in Ghana. We have Hassan Fall, who is the manager of Lambaye Learning Center in Senegal. And we have Dr. Luis Bezuden, who is a researcher at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. So before we go ahead to properly start the conversation, I would like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Hassan.
Thank you, Gamli. Hello, everyone. My name is Hassan Fall. I'm the Senegalese and I work in Lambaye. I'm the manager of Lambaye Learning Center. Lambaye Learning Center is a center to promote STEM for the young. And we try the women and also we do some activities in for cultural activities. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Luis.
Hi everyone, and thank you to Gameli and JOGL for the invite to be here today. I'm very pleased. As Gameli said, my name is Louise Bezuidenhout. I'm a researcher at the University of Cape Town. My work looks mainly at data infrastructures and ICT infrastructures in low and middle income countries, particularly in Africa. And I currently work on a bigger project that is called Fair Work, that is advocating for labor rights on for gig workers on gig platforms. So thinking about issues to do with responsible innovation, thinking about issues to do with equity and access to data, and decolonizing technological spaces in Africa is really where I'm working in at the moment.
Manu.
Thank you so much. Okay, good. You can hear me. So I am, I know Gameli through different capacities. I've also been a member of the World Economic Forum. I've been on the global board of the Shaper community. I think part of the reason I bring that is because WEF credits itself with coining the term Fourth Industrial Revolution, with the founder, Professor Schwab, writing a bit about it. In terms of my day job, I work for a global tech company, which also leverages the idea of technology. One of the exciting projects I do with my day job is finding intersections with sustainability and empowering communities in ways in which, especially in diverse and marginal communities, folks can find innovative practices, right? So I think I'm excited to bring, not directly, but, or as overtly, but as slyly as I can, some of the insights, because some of what I used to do in research at Wits Business School and exploring 4IR in relation to the Continental Free Trade Agreement, trade liberalization, competitive advantage, as well as the advent of accelerators, co-working spaces. I'll be sharing a bit around that. And also, like, I think what Gamali said or mentioned, I've also been a social entrepreneur, so I've been testing out some of my own ideas in terms of opening up a hub for artisans, creative folks, and finding out what is the intersection between commerce, connectivity, and culture that can actually be both validating for folks within communities, but also can be commercialized in a way that maybe hasn't been intentionally done. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and happy to touch on all of these.
Awesome, thank you very much. Really lovely to have all of you join us. I'm going to start with you straight, Emmanuel, since you are associated with the World Economic Forum and more or less originators of this term we call Fourth Industrial Revolution. So when we use this terminology, Fourth Industrial Revolution, what exactly do we mean?
Yeah, so thank you again, Gamali. And I'm sure Louise and Hassan would agree with me, even though the term Fourth Industrial Revolution is coined or marketed heavily and WEF gets a lot of the credit, it really is an intersection of technology that already exists. There are academic papers that talk about, not necessarily in the sense of sequential industrializations. I think the framework WEF uses is from the first, second, Fourth Industrial Revolution being these opportunities that internet things like artificial intelligence, things like data centers, things like the proliferation and access of cell phones and others, allowing this new and exciting opportunities that I've seen, and I may loosely characterize into things that either brings a lot of optimism or in a lot of narratives, a lot of despair of like being left behind and not having access. I think the way I would, in consultation with quite a number of folks in academia, one of, I guess, innovation theorists and economists, Kung Lee and others that speak about it, it really is just the intersection of some technological advancement. I think that we're seeing certain things that we're able to do at a faster, more rapid rate. Things like machine learning, automated response. But at the same time, there's a lot of argument that it really isn't as revolutionary as it is being advertised. So I'll be cautious in giving that broad and borrowing from different spaces. But hopefully that narrative helps your audience have a flavoring of Fourth Industrial Revolution being marketed as something, expressions of it in specific industries like artificial intelligence, like biomedicine, and automated spaces that affects things like agriculture and other things, manufacturing specifically, but also in spaces that are lacking. So the advent of internet and access for all, whether it's mobile technology, being aligned to sustainable and economic equitable growth. So trying to look at that in that space. So I'll leave it there so that at least everybody can pick something from that broad definition.
Oh, thank you very much, Emmanuel. That's quite a lot. Yeah, I mean, my understanding here is we are talking of technologies like the internet, and I mean, providing faster and easier ways of communication, but then we're also talking of the jumps that we've experienced in terms of technology development and how that basically transforms or influences various sectors, of course, with implications for society. So that's quite interesting. Hassan, so when we are looking at this concept of Fourth Industrial Revolution, moving away from the big terms and the jargons, how does that apply, like in an African context? For example, your work in Senegal, enabling young people to have access to technology. How does this whole discussion around the Fourth Industrial Revolution apply to your context?
So, Gamli, thank you for this question. But I think that for Senegal, I will say the context because Fourth Industrial Revolution technology offer us a myriad of social and human service community opportunity. Reach more people, especially those we have vulnerable, hard to reach or left behind on our most challenging social and environmental problems. These technologies promote and facilitate social innovation, okay, and make it more inclusion. Today, it's difficult to do social innovation without integration of 40 revolution technology. Okay, for Lambai Learning Center, for example, we have developed programs, STEM programs for young people, because we think that if in Africa we must develop technologies for our country, we must invest it on the young people. Or at Lambai Learning Center, we learn STEM programs, call it Lambai Innovation Challenge, to train students on STEM programs and entrepreneurship. In these programs, 2020 social impact project were developed by the students using cutting-edge technologies with a scientific approach. Okay, among these projects, I can mention we have an intelligent anti-kettle theft system that uses Arduino technology and allows to securitize the cattle of especially in rural areas where left cars are the most frequently. Okay, and another project we have developed a remote medical system diagnostic system to facilitate access to health care of the population, especially during this period of COVID-19. We have people afraid to go to the hospital. Okay, so in this program we have shown how important it is to include the young of the process of digital and technology transformation, and of the young by training them in the technology for 40 industrial revolution to promote social innovation in Africa. Thank you. The microphone.
Fantastic, because so I come from an environment and health background, and anytime I'm hearing about IoT or data, all I'm thinking about is how do you measure environmental parameters like pollution, and how do you connect that to place and innovation. So for me, I think it's really interesting to hear from you as well. The fact that with 4IR, we are looking at how do you create solutions to address environmental challenges and social challenges. And the angle that you've brought in terms of the participation of young people is very powerful. How do we create programs that can give people more skills to be able to face the world that we are going to face? So I'll just like say those and thumbs up to the fascinating work that you're doing over there in Dakar. So I'm going to go straight to Louis, who has been doing some research on data, how that connects to innovation and its impact for various dimensions of life. And so coming in from your critical lens as a researcher, we are talking about all these 4IR revolutions, 4IR technologies being unleashed on the world. Are there any particular things that we in Africa should be aware of in terms of opportunities or risk or whatever?
Thanks for that. That's not a small question. It's really nice to follow the other two speakers because what they're saying really taps into the way I'm thinking at the moment. I liked what Emmanuel was saying about the fact that the fourth industrial revolution involves a lot of technologies that are very familiar to us, and that it's not all new and shiny, special, different things. And I think it's something very interesting to think of in Africa is that while we talk a lot about the fourth industrial revolution, we don't necessarily talk that much about the third industrial revolution. And by the third industrial revolution, thinking about the use of IT and the internet to digitize production, distribution, and services. And I feel that sometimes when we're talking about the fourth IR, we forget that those two revolutions are happening almost concurrently in Africa, that we haven't progressed from one to the other. It's not sequential in the way it is perhaps more in high-income countries. And that taps into really what Hassan was saying about the need to upskill and the need to get the infrastructures, the data infrastructures, the ICT infrastructures in place while we're still thinking about the future. So I think we have a really interesting time as Africans in that we are not only, in a way that we're revolutionizing the way we're thinking about our futures, but we're also in a position where we're currently building the infrastructures that are going to support the fourth industrial revolution. So while we're in a critical tipping point, we're also in a great position of opportunity at the moment, because we can now learn from what's happened in high-income countries and what worked and didn't work in their third industrial revolution to try and tailor the investments we're making to accelerate our fourth industrial revolution. So I would say that we're in a very interesting position at the moment. It's either going to be very risky, we're going to just adopt wholesale the infrastructures that have worked in the global north, and therefore reproduce some of not only the evolving errors in those infrastructures, but also the way that the high-income countries are thinking about a digital revolution. Or we could be taking control over our third industrial revolution to make sure that the fourth industrial revolution in Africa actually reflects what we really want. So I'll stop there for the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm learning a lot from your delivery. I mean, the first point is what I just typed in the chat. The fact that it looks like the fourth industrial revolution is happening at the same time as other facets of development or other facets of industrialization. And of course, there are huge risks and challenges when it comes to the context. It looks like Emmanuel has a point, so I would invite him to come on.
Yeah, thank you. I know you have another series of questions, but I didn't want to miss that. I definitely appreciate what Hassan was saying, but also Dr. Louise was touching on something that I think for me has been an urgent rallying cry, because I think that if your audience and all of us who are engaged and decide not just to be consumers of tech or be just the people who we buy whatever latest gadget in its use, but we don't think of the agency we have in constructing it contextually. So I love what I was hearing with Hassan and talking about impact for climate change, but the smart use of some of these technological advances, right? So like even the comparison to the processing memory that cell phones are being created to the past processing memory that you would have had to resources in order to use in order to computate and others. I think that one of my personal anxieties is that I don't know if a lot of us in emerging markets, global south, on the African continent, understand the agency we have to co-create. And so a lot of times I worry that the language of it, because of, and I think that's when I first spoke, you were like, yes, the breakdown of the complex definitions. I think because there seems to be a bias in who's saying it, we don't own it in order to accept that a lot of what we have, and I can say this confidently from a professional standpoint, everybody, whether you're in the global north or global south, is a potential data point, whether it's for commercialization, whether it's for policy, whatever. So our voices are being, or our experiences are being documented. What I'm hoping that the people who are listening to this discussion, we need to allow our agency to be utilized. We need to negotiate. So nobody, whether it's in Switzerland, whether it's Miami, whether it's India, because India is very high on the Global Innovation Index now, and they have a very strong forecast on where they see themselves in innovating. But no Indian government policy or document is going to say we'll make room for South Africa, Guinea, Senegal, or Ghanaian innovation agency. It just doesn't happen that way. So I hope that, just on the back of Dr. Louise's points, that as people are listening to this, there's an agency that we're encouraging people who are listening, partners, organizations, that we do have to look at ourselves as co-creators and contributors to not just the narrative and then criticism, but in the creation and utility and use. And then I think that way people's mind shift, and hopefully the idea of technology linking to sustainability will be closer together. But yeah.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead, please.
I just wanted to jump in on the back of that, and I totally agree with what Emmanuel was saying, that there is actually, there's not a particularly robust understanding of co-creation on the African continent, that socially responsive technology or contextually appropriate technology is not the same as co-created technology. And by co-created technology, I don't necessarily just mean having communities consulted about the tech they want, but also having developers consulted about the tech that's being imposed on them, having data curators consulted about where the data is going to be stored, and so forth. So I feel we need to take a lot more ownership about the entire continuum of technological innovation, instead of just saying, well, you know, the tech's been tweaked so it works in Africa, or, you know, it's can work in a lower bandwidth setting. That's not really the same as, that's just socially responsive and you know, contextually embedded. It's not the same as co-creation. So totally agree.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, I'm going to ask a question in relation to some of the points that you've just made. So I mean, I think that when we are talking about for IR, or I mean any subject matter, for that matter, usually you would have it affecting an individual, say on a micro scale, or a community, and then we also have this macro scale effect. It can be national or regional. And so I think part of the work has to do with the understanding that we have as individuals and our various organizations and how we choose to be in the space. But a lot of it also has to do with, you know, how the government steps in to, for example, put in place policy, you know, to prepare us for the changes. It's not just about the changes, because when we are talking of the changes, it's not like we are waiting for these changes to happen. There are changes that are already happening, but there has to be some leadership in terms of steering the affairs. So I wanted to find out from your experiences, your various experiences in Ghana, Senegal, South Africa, how like there's leadership for getting us ready to be able to participate in the fourth industrial revolution from a government point of view, or from a leadership point of view. Would you like to start, Emmanuel?
Sorry, but yes, I think I can share a bit. There are a couple of things that I really tried to experiment on, and I think I'll borrow a bit from, we had an innovation policy course at WITS, and University of Witwatersrand, or WITS, is based in Johannesburg, and in the business school, we're looking at innovation management thoroughly, but also like, in which ways can policy either accelerate some of these conversations we're talking about? How can they be contextually put together? What are the gaps? So I'll borrow a bit of that. And then also, like last year, I tried to work with our governments specifically on the year of return, beyond the year of return, in ways in which governments themselves creates windows of opportunity. So that's a specific innovation kind of term. There's an academic, and she's won Schumpeter Prize. She's an economist, Maria Marquezado, and she has written about the entrepreneurial state and ways in which government, with our tax dollars and resources, they are the ones that actually drive a lot of the innovation that we see without necessarily collecting credit. A summary of that is that we tend to use specific companies as individual examples for innovation. So whether it's your Apples, your Googles, your Facebook, and then we tend to give like Jeff Bezos, Steve, these specific individual actors, forgetting that a lot of their opportunity to innovate, tax rebates, a lot of their funding initially, whether it's what came from a United States series of innovation policy. So that backwards, almost like origin thinking, whether the conducive environment that may have created a Silicon Valley that you can't replicate, but the lessons learned then for our governments in the global South, how then do our governments see themselves not just as tax collectors, not just as folks who are either going in and reading budgets, but then as entrepreneurial actors in of themselves, and being able to be folks that by creating certain policies that are responsive. One of the things that we were hoping to see was having local African governments also ask the right stakeholders, right? So an example of this might be some of the things that we see with youth conferences that I think President Paul Kagame and Rwanda does. What we'd like to see an extension is that then the lessons learned from those are embedded into policies that affect youth commerce and development. An example that we don't see, and pardon all the Nigerians out there, but it's what President Buhari has been doing in terms of Twitter and suppression, where there's even a leaked kind of like memo on how they're going to treat tech and fintech companies in Nigeria without consulting stakeholders. So I think when we have that policy, we have enough examples of what not to do outside of maybe US example, maybe looking at Israel and the fact that they're considered an innovation state. It's not because of a single actor, it's because of a series of policies that regardless of who is head of a country, the state consistently owns and participates in that. And so without going to different details, I think maybe I'll bring one home for the Ghanaians who are on here. We look at arts and culture more as esoteric. Some people may appreciate it, may not. But if you apply a commercialization business model to it, there is a demand and supply. The commodity may be the experience, the commodity may be beads, it may be X, Y, Z. There was a window of opportunity when President Nana Akufo-Addo made a declaration that after 100 years of Africans leaving the shores of Africa in the slave trade, we were opening our borders specifically to have that unique experience. So what did that lead up to? It led up to private sector folks who were probably not even into whether it was leisure, tourism, curating these experiences, having a whole series of events, tours, etc., paraphernalia and others. So there was a window of opportunity in that. And then now there's the beyond the return 7 pillars, where there's nationalization, there's investment tied into a specific group of people who are tied into this culture and historical landmark that can come back into the country and have access to that. So I say these examples to tie in what innovation and innovation policy may look like. And then also, unfortunately, using the Nigerian example to show what innovation policy should not look like.
Very much, Emmanuel. I think the points about the year of return is quite interesting. And for those of you who are not familiar with Ghana, it's basically a government policy to make it possible for Africans or Black people in the diaspora to be able to connect back to cultural roots, to be able to connect back to their cultural and historical roots on the continent, various cultural exchanges. And so I even see lots of opportunity for innovators to create stuff around virtual reality and augmented reality and stuff like that, connecting back to the diaspora. I'd like to move to Hassan. Hassan, what is happening in Senegal when it comes to policy around fourth industrial revolution?
For Senegal, I think that we have some policy, some political to promote innovation, social innovation in Senegal, but we have some lack, of course. But I think that in Africa, we must invest it for the young people to promote social innovation in primary school, for example, and in middle school, and after we can do this for our university. For example, in Senegal, we have some young people to have a creativity, to can do some example of some project, social project, innovation social project, but we don't have a school or a center to develop this creativity of these young people. I think that we must in Africa or in Senegal or whatever make an environment to develop it for the young people, this creativity. Also, another another problems if we have in Senegal, I think that we don't promote the public school or the public innovation. For example, we have in Lambai, when we start our programs, we have in 90 students on 100. We can't it can't use a computer, and after 8 months or 90 months, these young people today can do coding programs or another programs for technologies. So today we can see that in Senegal we have however a policy or programs for social innovation, but we think that we can do many effort to attain our objective of this programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hassan. I really value your focus and emphasis on youth capacity building and preparing them for the future, because of course Africa has a very youthful population base, and that's going to be the strength, and that's going to be the opportunity for the continent's transformation. So as much as we are able to build that capacity and prepare them and get them ready, we should be able to be more competitive. All right. Louis, I'm going to come back to you and specifically ask you to enlighten us more about what's going on in South Africa. And I'm particularly interested in South Africa because when you follow politics or you follow the elections of South Africa, they actually use a lot of the buzzwords during the campaigns. The 4R, these parties coming up with this policy on X and Y at a level that we don't hear here in Ghana, and I assume maybe not the same in other African countries. So I'm quite curious, like, what's the discourse on policy around 4IR in South Africa?
Yeah, thanks for that. And I was going to say, I totally agree with you about the 4IR being, the buzzword du jour in South Africa. And I really appreciated starting this webinar with a clarification of what we mean, because I feel that often people who are using it in South Africa are not necessarily on board with the details of what it actually means. Nonetheless, despite that slightly critical approach to the discourse, there is a lot happening in South Africa. There's a lot of investment going into upskilling and training. There's investment into developing rural digital hubs. So trying to expand infrastructure, ICT infrastructure into rural areas to get more countrywide capacity and moving it out of the cities. And there's a lot of policy development as well. So South Africa's recently launched the Big Data and Cloud Policy, which is a very remarkable document and requires a range of different things, including that data collected on African citizens be made available to the government for reuse. And it's really great to see the government taking this seriously, the fact that the fourth industrial revolution is driven by data, it's fed by data, and without the control of the data that we need, we're not going to necessarily be able to take advantage of the youth potential and the innovation potential that we have. Nonetheless, there are concerns around that as well, and I think it's not just South Africa, but for any African country thinking of reproducing a policy like that, that it requires a huge amount of infrastructure to be able to live up to that. The storage capacity for even getting data from Uber, the storage capacity will rapidly outstrip the national capacity. And I feel that in that way, South Africa and most other African countries are missing a kind of systems thinking approach to the fourth industrial revolution and connecting the dots between the fun innovation parts and the huge potential and slightly boring things like data storage capacity and secure and reliable power to be able to power data storage capacity. So I feel there's a lot of opportunity still to critically question some of the policies coming out. That said, South Africa is also putting a huge amount of money into digital innovation. But in my opinion, and if there are South Africans on the call, I'm happy to debate this more. I think that there's chronic underfunding in certain aspects of this innovation ecosystem, and that there's a lot of money being put into getting prototypes ready, but there's not equal matched funding to get the prototypes into saleable products. And I feel in that way, we're dissipating some of the capacity that we could have for digital innovation by not being more pragmatic and sticking with a specific project right up to market instead of just until prototype and proof of concept. So I'll leave it there for now.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Luis. A lot of valuable points there as well. And the key one that I have picked out is the lack of a systems thinking approach. And I think that the systems thinking approach or systems thinking perspective is actually crucial in almost everything that we do. We should be doing in different countries across the continent. Yeah, I think that your perspectives have really answered many of the questions I've already had on top of my mind for us to explore during this chat. But I'm just going to ask you explicitly, Emmanuel, what do you make of the changing innovation landscape, in Ghana, in South Africa, and the very many African countries you are familiar with, the changing innovation landscape, and how does the 4IR, play into this changing landscape, and what are the kinds of opportunities that are emerging?
Well, thanks, Gamali. And thanks for this question. I think I've been thinking about it in the sense of pre-COVID and during COVID, because we're not really post-COVID, which is that kind of framework helps look at things critically. I think pre-COVID, there was an excitement. There was quite a bit of seemingly agency amongst millennials, partly because of maybe the access, or at least participatory access, of social media. You only needed an email address, or you didn't even need it. You needed a cell phone, or you just needed a SIM card. And then all of a sudden, you could have a global audience, or you could participate in a Google Play Store or an Apple Play Space, but more Google Play Store, because it was almost open playground. And to credit to some of the telcos like MTN and others that also have that folks could build games, tech solutions, and have it on a market space. I think that once the pandemic happened, the levers that kind of either stifle or enhance or create even more friction and stress with innovation, competition and commerce, or access to capital, have been really exacerbated. So it almost seems as if now that the pandemic has happened, the nation's excitement of young people being entrepreneurs, of folks taking up very new, whether occupations on being data analysts, coders, front end, CXX, you've seen that the reality of just staying alive, being in your community, finding a job has really hit home. And it's been really difficult because across many cities on the African continent, you've seen the exacerbation of not just the pandemic, but mismanagement of pandemic-like issues cause a lot of economies to retract. And most people who are affected by this are the most vulnerable, old people, women, children, young people. So I think that paints a bit of a bleak picture, but I think what it also has done, and I think if for those who are critical thinkers, those who are students of innovation, is to separate the wheat from the chaff. So what we're starting to see is that people should be building innovations that are community contextualized. I think a lot of people see global companies. A good example is Nokia, boots companies, or furniture companies, or even Lego. They don't start off by being globally relevant. Alibaba, they start off by being community relevant. And I think that for a while, the narrative around entrepreneurship in Africa has been go global. You could be the next Uber, you could be the next, forgetting the steps and also the validation that community gives you. So even though there's been a difficult, bleak picture painted by the pandemic, there's a reality check that there isn't as much resources to experiment and waste. But if you can find validation with some of the tools that you have, we're seeing that with fintech, whether it's POS devices that are helping and enabling local commerce, and rather than the banks and what they had, a huge disruption in just negotiating commerce. But we're also seeing that in dissemination of information. People have stopped wanting to compete with creating their own messengers. So the next to Google, they're now saying, what are the APIs and how can I develop on top of an already existing? To Louise's point about we are behind on the competition game for creating data centers. It's just not cost effective. For those who may be new to data centers, it's where a lot of cloud computing stores. You literally have infrastructure that helps store a lot of data, and a lot of our computers are locked onto that, but it costs millions to build and to maintain. And most of our African countries, we don't have that sitting budget to play in that space. But we have to start looking at what are the spaces we can, and it could be adoptive technology, co-created technology. I think Louise and I were playing around with technical terms a bit just to open it up to regular parlances. There's so much innovation that the rest of the world is taking from us. So one of them might be mobile money, the advent of it. The reason we're seeing quite a bit for a while, a lot of distributed ledger, Bitcoin, and others thrive on the continent because we don't have regulations that stifle that type of innovation. So it ties back to my point about agency. I think that it is a challenging time during COVID where people have really apparent challenges. We're thinking about health for family. We do face it, but I think that this is where innovation also can thrive, and that we do need to have contextualized innovation. Even the global company, so the company I work for, we're looking at what are the solutions coming out of communities in India, out of Nigeria, for the next big wave, right? And you might think that's counterintuitive, but outside of the company, we have Indians and Nigerians thinking of how to get into the company versus thinking of how would their solutions be what is absorbed. So I'll leave it at that. I don't think it's a unique story, but I think the innovation story of what we have now is that I'm very excited about the critically relevant, and I think it speaks to some of the government budgets on prototyping, the excitement on prototyping versus the necessity of use. So things like testing, temperature testing, sleep deprivation, healthcare apps, and hopefully also things like connecting to sustainable already existing practices. There are a whole slew of academics now that are looking at traditional indigenous African cultural practices, from mathematics to medicine to medicinal care, and applying things that we know in logistics, packaging, scaling. So you're seeing that cultural, maybe things that were not considered relevant, being rebranded. A loose esoteric one is like the healing properties of the shea plants, and now the booming share industry, but then the ownership of local people who are saying, we want to be the ones to be part of that delivery and supply chain and cosmetics and others. But I'll leave that there for others.
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's a very thorough answer. Appropriately deals with the micro to macro scale thing that I was talking about, and all the appropriate responses that have to come in. And so indeed, innovation is contextual, and I think that that's something that we really have to take on the back of our minds. We already have lots of questions coming in from our audience in the chat. So I'm going to post one of the questions to Hassan. So this question is coming from Hans Peter Sander, who is a friend of mine based in Bavaria, and he's a champion of rural innovation in Germany. And so his question goes that, what do you think about, can technologies associated with the fourth industrial revolution contribute to develop rural areas, small towns in Africa? And in terms of development, he means create businesses, jobs, and help young people. And how? Can you provide examples? What do you think?
Well, Gamli, I think that for this question, I would like to launch an apple by saying that the technology capacity and means of the new industrial revolution of the enormous potential and remind me some of the existent to Africa, because we think that we must develop it in Africa, a radical transformation. This radical transformation are needing if just translation is to be possible. Okay, this requires in inclusion of all the people of the continents, a democratic continuum engagement of development. Okay, the young generation of Africa would be seen as the drive force of our transformation. Okay, it is therefore essential for young Africa to not exclude it from HIV distance transition by ensuring that they have access to education and training systems that building their capacity and enable them to thrive. This system must be maintained as a public good and not further privatize of the state content to be allowed out. It's my mind. Thank you.
Yeah, Hassan. Yeah, so your point about the radical transformation actually sits with somebody, Taban Sebese, who is commenting from South Africa. He says a rapid economic transformation sounds so South African. So I suppose you and the South African leaders are vibing at the same frequency. I'm going to come back to you, Luis. I know you've raised some points earlier about the processes that are necessary to be able to introduce OIR into our African tech ecosystems. But I would like to find out from you what you think, what's your opinion in terms of possible risk. You know, when we are saying that, yes, the world is going to be transformed by fourth industrial revolution, we want to jump into the game, play AI, play big data, blockchain. Are there any possible risk as far as the implementation is concerned in African countries? And how can we limit those risks there?
It's a great question. I think definitely there's a lot of risk associated with the fourth industrial revolution, particularly piggying back on my earlier comment that we are kind of in the midst of the third and the fourth industrial revolution at the same time. I think for me, one of the biggest problems as a social scientist of data is to do with the lack of robust data policies on the continent. In particular, there are very few policies that actually mediate the control and reuse of data, both data that's collected in Africa, but Africans using data that they've gained access to elsewhere. And I think when we're thinking about responsibilities, it's always important to do a quid pro quo, you know, that it's not just that other people need to be responsible about African data, but Africans need to be responsible about how we use our data as well. And I do think that without those robust policies and without systems in place to monitor data usage, we're very much opening ourselves up to misuse and abuse of the potential of the fourth industrial revolution. And I think that links into affiliated issues such as cybercrime, you know, that many countries don't have particularly robust data protection systems, and that can lead to a lot of cybercrime occurring if you're encouraging the use of apps to disseminate data, to gather personal data and so forth. We could be opening ourselves up to huge cyber attacks, and we could actually be putting ourselves in harm's way because of that. So I feel that the risks I see associated with the fourth IR are definitely risks associated with infrastructure and policy deficits, rather than risks associated with introduction of specific technologies.
Thank you very much, Luis. And talking about risk, I'm going to ask another question from our audience. And this question is coming from Mohal. And yeah, anybody who has an opinion on this question, feel free to take a stab at it. So it says, or he or she says, I wonder, maybe we should also be focusing on e-waste produced on the continent to create more sustainable ways of innovating in Africa. How long can we go on being consumers of tech? How do we become active producers and not just consumers of technologies and gadgets? How can we recycle, repurpose e-waste in order for us to become global players? Well, please don't get me started on electronic waste. I'm going to throw the question to our audience. Maybe Gamor, since you're from Ghana and we seem to have a lot of issues with electronic waste.
That is Gamali's way of saying that since you have a lot to say, I'll throw this hard question at you. Hopefully you can catch it and then come off as something very sensible. Actually, yes, there's a couple of things that I think that we're starting to see and one of the things that I always think about are what are the levers that either motivate national actors and what are the things that we know by and large that regardless of what political actors in, they're going to make a concession for, right? So e-waste is a very interesting one because it comes from commercial activity, and similar to waste that comes from any of the industrialized eras, but particularly when it comes to like oil, energy resources, we don't have an external body or strong external bodies that can mandate things or could mandate us to take more responsibility for some of the things around e-waste. And that's why there's a huge drive with COP17 with UK, climate change, all of these declarations that look great and marketed with all the graphics and ideas. But when you get to it, really it is recalibrating and changing the way we make profits, the way we make money, and also like e-waste in Africa, like it's a very oxymoronic thing because we're not industrialized to create our own. It's more like the dumping of e-waste on Africa. So the large majority of the e-waste that we see that is detrimental, and Ghana, unfortunately, is one of the landmass sites of dumping of old electronics, and off of the Gulf of Guinea, coast of Guinea, is also the dumping of all of these old electronics from other parts of the world, right? I think part of what we've started to see is having smart enough policy where countries are negotiating either carbon credits, are negotiating funding in order to tackle this, so that we're not just being the recipients, but we have agency. Because I think the global conversation on e-waste and even just carbon emissions and others in that broad narrative, it's really US, China, Europe, Germany. These are the true big corporates. They're the ones that when the pandemic happened from March of 2000 to maybe July, when we're saying the earth took a breather, is because of these huge industrialized countries not functioning. We've gone back to it and a lot of that has come. So I think once we accept that, then our role comes into it, because how we play a role is that we can't force them to stop. We are the recipients, but we can start to enforce in which ways can we protect our natural forests, in which ways can we make sure that our indigenous lands, and for us in Ghana, you can look at things like galamsey and commercial activity with gold, etc. The way that extends to innovation is, or it extends to innovation in the way that we're thinking about it, is all these commodities people are putting out there, Bitcoins and others, whether it fluctuates or not, usually the demand for gold then means the demand for a lot of these things that affect what economic activity we have in Ghana. So we live in such an interconnected, and that's why I was saying the definition of FIRE is not just, oh, we have social media, or Jeff Bezos is something $1 billion. No, it means that when there's such an interconnected space within our commerce, that when there are levers in one aspect, whether in commodities exchange, when people are feeling like they cannot trust the US dollar and they purchase gold, it has a direct link to illegal mining and climate change and enforcement. So for us, we need to start thinking progressively with what we have, the agency we have, our lands, our local laws. We need to start thinking about when people are negotiating for carbon credit, how do we translate that into funding for us to be able to do that? Like countries now have within negotiations, I'm not an environmental specialist, but there was a wonderful article, I forget what African country it was, but they're having the G7 fund some of the Amazon forests, native forests, because that is a net positive to carbon versus what they have over there. So those are ways in which we can start to negotiate with the West, making sure that we know that we have an opportunity to offset already the destruction. I don't know. I used to be strong on political science. I don't think we have the teeth and muscle to tell China and the United States to slow down on their industry. I also think it's a very painful thing to ask for global South countries not to industrialize so at the expense of our people not getting economic opportunities. But I think that there's some thinking there in how we negotiate. How do we industrialize? What ways do we co-create? And I think that's an open gap to think through. And for the person who asked the question about e-waste, we need folks like you to be in the business space as well as the advocacy and social enterprise space, so that those things can be appreciated across the table. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you've answered the question very well, and the questioner is really excited about your answer as well. So you see, there you go, shouldn't be scared. I think the other thing to add on top of it is also the policy of it in terms of, I think that we should be able to control how much of the electronic waste, electronic waste does not normally come as electronic waste, but as electrical equipment that are close to their end of life. But we should be able to control how much of this stuff also flows into our system. I know Luis is very keen to come in, and I'm going to allow you to come in. But
Thanks.
Because I've connected with you through the Africa Open Science and Hardware system, the whole thing about the maker movement, because I think that's also like another powerful way of looking at addressing electronic waste, because of course we have some of this waste already with us. How does that get transformed to useful products, and how do we even think of safe process in terms of making use of do-it-yourself approaches? And I don't want to fall victim to techno utopia, but there are means that some of these things can be handled. A good example. So yes, Luis, please go ahead with your point and then address the issue of how the maker movement can also help.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, I agree with everything that Emmanuel was saying, but I also think that perhaps we're failing to recognize a strength in Africa that we can capitalize on in terms of e-waste, but also in terms of wasteful innovation. Africa has a very long history, a very proud history of repurposing, doing frugal innovation, thinking about low impact. Obviously, our supply chains, our currency fluctuations, it has conditioned us into being very frugal innovators. And at a time when being environmentally sustainable, being low tech, low cost is actually a marketable commodity that you can capitalize on and use it to break into these global markets. I think African innovators should be thinking about that very seriously. Can we find a way that is lower cost, lower impact to do same, if not better? And if we're not doing that, why not? We can use this to our advantage as well, and not just say, oh, we're getting tech waste dumped on us, but also saying, if you guys are dumping your rather rubbish waste on us, can we show you up and say, actually, you don't need to be generating all this waste. We can do it better. We can do it cheaper. We can do it smarter. So I think we should be thinking both ways about that. The other thing that I just wanted to raise was the issue of it's not just the physical hardware, but also the cost of the environmental impact cost of data. That everything to do with data has quite a high carbon footprint. And we need to be thinking about that in terms of how we as Africans conceptualize our relationship to environment, that we shouldn't just be wholesale advocating for unlimited use of tech, unlimited use of data. We should start thinking about what makes sense to us. And if that is in line with the way we as Africans are thinking about curating our planet for future generations.
Yes, I think that's a whole topic on its own, but thank you so much for your point about frugal innovation. I think that's the answer as well. Low cost, low impact, low tech, but then it's low cost, low impact in terms of environmental impact, low tech, but high impact in terms of the other dimensions of impact. And also this concept of regenerative economy, which is embedded in a lot of African thought systems. I think we would have to revisit some of these systems where we look at, of course, a triple bottom line when it comes to sustainability, but other elements in terms of wellness and spirituality, from the point of view of looking at, again, individuals and communities intertwined, and also nature. So like when you are producing, you are not just thinking of consumption, but you're also thinking of replacement. I think that a lot of these conceptions will be valuable going forward. I think that we have really exhausted all the questions that we have and the questions from our audience as well. So at this point, I would like to ask again from the audience if anybody has any final question or submission, or if you want to make a point, feel free to use the reactions, use the raise hand feature so that I would invite you to ask your question, Emmanuel and Louise directly. Unfortunately, we've lost Hassan because he was having a problem with electricity. He indicated to me at the beginning, and it's like, unfortunately, things have gone out and he's disconnected now.
Gameli, I also wanted to say, if any of the audience disagrees with anything we've said, we'd love to hear about that as well.
Yes, absolutely. If you disagree with any point so far, would like to hear your inputs as well.
Hi.
Okay, Sabang.
Hello. It's not like I disagree, but I think it's a comment. I think it was made by Gamor. I think he said something like, the fourth industrial revolution, it's not as revolutionary as it said on the street. But for me personally, I believe it is. Maybe because there's, at least at this moment, there's a whole lot of red tape that is being built, right, by a lot of states, a lot of governments. So we almost tempted not to fully appreciate or fully practice it as we think it should be. So I wonder if is that a fair comment, like saying it's not as revolutionary, even though we are not, we are almost barricaded not to fully show how revolutionary it can be. So do you want to say something about that, please?
Sure. I think this is directed to me. I think when I say that, I'm also being, I'll share my answer in two spaces. One, as a student of innovation. So when I say that it's not revolutionary, I'm being didactic. Something can be disruptive where it changes the course of things that we've known about and have an effect. So let's say you have a car that's going from A to B, a wall or something disrupts it. So it no longer travels where it's going in the intended direction or natural course, right? I think a lot of the technologies that we're seeing that are being highlighted specifically are disruptive to specific industries. I hear you on, and I think the other one is just regular parlance of revolutionary, right? So I think a lot of the pushback in what maybe, I think government as a political actor, as an enforcer of security, but also governments now play a role by collecting taxes, creating bonds, are facilitators of economic activity, are threatened because, I apologize, I'm using a technical term, state capture. So state capture is the ability for governments to be able to benefit or reap from commercial activities, specifically innovation. And what we've seen is that, unfortunately, most of our, and this is more political science, our political actors that represent themselves as our governments have not caught up to innovation in the way that traditional commerce has happened. So the pushback to governments in terms of on social media, on Bitcoin and others, is less an indicator that these things are truly revolutionary, definitely disruptive, than the fact that fourth industrial revolution is this incredibly revolutionary, I guess, moment in time. I think the articulation of it, I think you hinted at it, is the potential of truly having widespread change, right? I'll give an example. Some people look at the invention of light, right? The light bulb and what it did for commercial activity at the national level, global level. But then you look at all the industries that then came out of that, in a way, locomotive or transport, or just, okay, basics, the wheel, right? Something that now with physics, you can put something on and you look at the wheel and circular in its specific way and the way that it permeates almost every other thing. So I think my context in sharing that is that in most spaces, we do feel that there's strong disruption happening, but the verdict is out on if a lot of what we're saying is truly revolutionary. The flip side also is, I think I share this not necessarily because I'm being a true scientist or innovation person who's giving grades and marking what is revolutionary, what is disruptive, and what's not. I think there's power in narrative. And so when we understand that this is not something that is happening to us, that somebody externally is explaining, or this is not something, because if you go into other spaces, maybe we are outliers. If you're on this Zoom call, you do have some level of engagement with technology, you do have some level of privilege and access, but a large majority of people may not be on Zoom, may not be able to video conference. They don't feel like there's been a fourth industrial revolution in their lives, right? And so there's an amount of, for us, at least in studying innovation also, adoption that something is no longer innovative and at the forefront, where it's like just a small few people who are like able to go to space, but then it becomes ubiquitous because all of us can now have, well, not all of us, most of us can now buy a wheel, can now maybe have access to a vehicle. Most of us are working on getting access to electricity, for example, if that's helpful. So I think for the reason I phrase it that way in this conversation is to know that we still have the opportunity to play in what we're seeing as disruption, innovation, in a way that the revolution hasn't come and passed us. We do have an opportunity to be part of that narrative.
Thank you very much. Our opportunity to become part of the narrative sounds like a very strong and powerful way to end that. So I'll just like to say a very big thank you to my brother Emmanuel Gamor from many, many years ago for joining us today for this chat, and also Dr. Luis, who is a great mentor to me, also for sharing your perspectives as well. Big thank you to Hassan, who unfortunately was not able to finish the journey with us, but for also his wonderful and remarkable contributions. And I have forced Hassan to speak a lot of English today because he usually just speaks French, but his really valuable contributions as well with what's going on at Lamba Innovation Center and the general landscape in Senegal and around Africa as well. Thank you for your wonderful contributions to our chat. I'd just like to use the opportunity to just kind of make some quick announcements. If you're interested to learn more about JOGL, we are building community, looking at people interested in open science and innovation in Africa. So I'm going to post the link to our space. So if you're already on JOGL, please check out our space and follow us. Or if you're interested, you can also just sign up and join. And what the platform does is to support people who are interested in creating their own projects. So a good example is we have an initiative focused on addressing COVID-19, for example, COVID-19, and we've had a number of we've supported a number of innovators to be able to create their own projects and solutions to address some aspects of the pandemic, including innovation in Africa as well. We are currently building a thematic community which is focused on addressing antimicrobial resistance in Africa. And so we have a space specifically for that. You can check it out if you are a student in public health, biochemistry, or microbiology who is interested to learn more about antimicrobial resistance, or you are just interested in advocacy or education around it. You are welcome to have a look. We are currently receiving applications for our first workshop on building capacity on antimicrobial resistance and also digital mapping. And so I'm going to drop the link also in the chat, so you can also have a look at the application form in case you are interested in this topic and you want to participate in the workshop. Feel free to sign up, and also feel free to share with colleagues who are in that space who will be interested to learn. Thank you all for joining our chat. Thanks for your comments, your incisive questions, and bye-bye.
Thanks so much.